On New Year's Day, a few years ago, I had my first panic attack. And if you talk to anyone who experiences anxiety about panic attacks, although they may never have experienced them, they will likely say they can relate. They know how that feels. And that's certainly something that I said for a long time, having experienced anxiety through most of my life, until I actually had one. To put it into words, it felt like terror, like drowning and being lit on fire from the inside at the same time. Like my mind was desperately trying to thrash its way out of my body, and all of my insides were trying to follow suit. My rib cage crushed the air out of my lungs. My hands clenched, went numb. Nausea surged through my body and seeped into every fiber under my skin. I didn't know exactly what was happening to me, but it felt familiar. Terrifying, but valid. Like, even though I couldn't find a single reason for this utter dread, it was justified all the same. I was dying. I had to be. Too much drinking the night before, not enough sleep. Maybe that's all it took. Or maybe I had a brain tumor. Either way, my husband was going to find me on the bathroom floor, purple skin, grasping for that last breath of air. He did find me, though I was still breathing, still alive. And he calmly entered the room, sat with me on the floor, and told me to breathe. He held my hand, he looked confidently into my eyes, and he told me that I'd be all right. And I was. 8 hours later, I was. My husband suffers from anxiety too, and he knew all too well what I was going through in that moment. It was a godsend at the time to have someone that got it, that could assertively state that I was going to be fine. I didn't need to go to the hospital. I was going to live for another day. But I did teeter on the edge of panic for days after that. I walked around with an elephant on my chest, paranoid at the onset of anything that resembled a queasy stomach. I was scared for no reason and all the time, and exhausted with battling for solid ground. After a few weeks, things seemed to ease up and life carried on. But the threat was there, and soon enough, a few weeks later, another one came. This time it was in the afternoon, as my kids were arguing in the yard. I had to hide in the basement, scared that they would find me and get terrified themselves. But I made it through, about a half hour this time, and returned to my responsibilities. And over the past couple of years, I have returned to terror on several occasions, always triggered by some seemingly harmless circumstance. But the challenge for me hasn't just been the attacks. For me, it was about a loss of control that I couldn't rectify. Because I have always been someone who prides myself in understanding my own demons, my own mind, who takes proactive caution to keep my head in the game and above water. Since I was young, I have been hyper attentive to my own self-awareness. I have analyzed myself to death, trying to understand me and my world on a holistic and existential level. I am drawn to people, seekers, who are looking for big answers and who see the world through sensitive eyes, eyes that look for patterns, themes, meaning. I am aware almost all the time of what my thoughts are doing and how those thoughts are translating and transforming the world around me. I am positive, passionate, and in tune with my surroundings almost all of the time. cause and effect, intuitive, and rational. But the onset of my panic attacks didn't seem rational. Sure, life is stressful. I have 2 young kids at home, a husband that works out of town, a growing writing business that requires all of my creative work to be done while I simultaneously attend to making meals and breaking up fights and answering the mommy call thousands of times a day. But I've always had stress to some degree. So why panic now? Why this fear? What am I supposed to be getting out of all of this? In my lifelong quest to understand, I have become obsessed with story. I break things down piece by piece when trying to find meaning in a circumstance or an event. In my work as a writer and as a coach, I am always assessing the stories that we tell ourselves and how they help us make decisions, navigate the world, create our identity. And now, in my own journey, my story includes this. I am someone who has panic attacks. I can safely say that my panic attacks have been some of the most horrifying experiences of my life. But that isn't the whole story. In fact, the story is really the most important piece. In the middle of a panic attack, no story matters. It is the releasing of story that has helped bring me back to solid ground. I can try and tell myself that everything is okay, that I'm not dying, that it will all work out. But those words ricochet against the sheer momentum of unwarranted fear. It doesn't matter that everything is fine, because somewhere in the ethers, there is a story that things aren't fine. Children are dying around the world, after all. Poverty, war, real terror. What matters is that I breathe. What matters is that nothing can be done. What matters is the moment, the space between things where there is light and air and freedom, the space beyond the story. It has taken me several attacks to fully understand this, that the best way for me to get through these attacks is to pause, to drop the narrative, to let thoughts dissolve until I am fully in my body, aware of my sensations, without judgment, without the need to fit them into a matrix of meaning. For me, panic attacks have been an opportunity, an excuse to get back to neutral, to remember that our stories are us and they are not. We are crafting them, molding them, experiencing them, but we are also outside of them, in the clear space between the words in our head. This has given me a sense of freedom and sovereignty. After all, if we can choose to let go of the story, we can choose to pick it up again however we want to. We are writing it, not just living it. We are experiencing it, but not inside of it. It's inside of us, and it's ours to manipulate, to mold. And if we can take a step back sometimes, when the story goes sideways and we experience that angst, we can find that quiet space within where we have broad view, and the narrative, once again, becomes our own.